Last night I finally finished A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas, book 2 in the ACOTAR series. Now, anyone who has read this series has told me that book 2 is where it gets good. You might not like the first one very much, but you're going to really love the second one. So, the question is this the book that has finally made me love ACOTAR? My name's Mark, this is The Book Thing, and this is my review of A Court of Mist and Fury. Yeah, I know, it's kind of stupid, a 46-year-old man reading a book that's so blatantly not for him. But I am part of the I'm With the Band's book club, where every month we pick a new book that has been banned or challenged in US schools, and we read it together. The first one we chose was A Court of Thorns and Roses, so inevitably we've gotten around to the second one, A Court of Mist and Fury. So, I'm going to give you my review of it. Because it's the second part of the series, there is inevitably going to be spoilers for the first part, of Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm going to keep it fairly spoiler-free, but I might dip into some mild spoilers on this. But I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't think anyone is going to watch this because they really want my opinion on whether or not to read A Court of Thorns and Roses or not. Quite frankly, I think a lot of people are just going to watch this because they just want to have a bit of a laugh at me getting really uncomfortable talking about A Court of Mist and Fury. So when we last saw Feyre in A Court of Thorns and Roses, she had been prisoner of the evil Amarantha. She'd been at the whims of Amarantha's lover Rhysand, and she was forced to take part in 3 trials, one of which was killing some innocent high fairies. At the end of all of that, she overcame everything, broke Amarantha's curse, and allowed Amarantha to be killed. So the curse was broken, everyone was happy, and everyone went off. And Feyre and Tamlin went back to the Spring Court. Hello, I'm Future Mark. I'm the one who edits past Mark's footage and attempts to add a sheen of competence to it, occasionally by interjecting with stuff that he left out. In this instance, there are 2 key things from the last book that he left out, one of which was that Rhysand, the High Lord of the Night Court, had coerced Feyre into an agreement where she would spend 1 week per month with him at the Night Court. And the second thing is that at the end of the last book, Feyre was killed and then resurrected as a High Fae. I feel that's kind of a big thing to have left out. We pick up the action 3 months later in the run-up to the wedding between Feyre and Tamlin, and Feyre is not okay. She is plagued by nightmares of her time at Amarantha's court, and specifically of the innocent lives that she had to take while she was there. Tamlin is become less than useless in being able to support her and has decided he just wants to protect her, and his version of protecting her is basically shutting her off from everyone and everything. And on the day of the wedding, Rhysand, High Lord of the Night Court, arrives with the intention of Feyre making good on her bargain to spend a week with him every single month, and he then whisks her away to the Night Court. If A Court of Thorns and Roses was Beauty and the Beast, this is about Persephone and Hades. As time goes on, you start to see the contrast between Rhysand and Tamlin, where Tamlin wants to keep her caged up, and Rhysand is of the opinion she can do whatever the hell she wants. This comes to a head when one night Tamlin is off to do some dangerous thing or other that he doesn't want Feyre to come with him on, and to prevent her from leaving the house, he sets up this barrier around the house, which Feyre then has this panic attack. Members of Rhysand's court come, take her away, and then she goes and to stay at the Night Court without any intention of going back to Tamlin. So that's kind of the jumping off point for the story, and where I want to start is on the positives. I think the way that Feyre's trauma after what happened to her in the mountain is dealt with actually really quite well. It's not dismissed as this thing that she can just get over and forget about. She's really stuck and dealing with this trauma, and it's starting to eat her up inside, and actually the relationship with Tamlin isn't any help in that regard. So you can kind of see why she needs that escape from it. again, as I said, there's going to be some spoilers with this, but where the story eventually goes around to is that Farah falls in love with Rhysand instead of Tamlin. And I think it's kind of brave to drop the whole trope of, that first love that she has being the one true and forever love that she's going to have. The sort of thing you've seen in so many of these sort of young adult and romance things before, where it's, that first person is the one that tends to be fixated upon forever. Having the sort of the conviction to look at it and say, actually, we can change who the male object of her affection is going to be for the rest of this series. And that's kind of a brave thing to do. And I thought that kind of subverted the tropes a little bit, and that was quite good. And I will say that the climax of the story as well, the last 100 pages, it has a really swift pace, and it's very, very action-packed, and it takes the story in a direction that you wouldn't necessarily have expected it to, and it ends on a cliffhanger that does actually compel you to want to continue with the series. The problem is everything that happens before that. Alright, first thing I would say on it is there isn't so much character development in the story, as every single fucking character from the previous book hasn't had an entire character transplant. Lucian has gone from being a sort of witty and loyal friend to being this ineffective yes man. Tamlin has gone from being a bit broody and a bit personalityless into a complete and utter arsehole and possessive and traitorous on top of that. And Rhysand has gone from being this guy who delighted in all of this torture to someone who all of that is just a front to distract from the lovely cuddly person that he really is underneath. So at some point it's fairly clear that while Sarah J. Maas was writing the first one, she kind of loved Rhysand as a character and wanted to put the focus on him, but it doesn't feel like she did the legwork in actually redeeming him as a character. So from Farah's perspective, she goes and spends time with him, and he's still the bastard who did all of that shitty stuff in the first book. But Tamlin locked her up once, so he's obviously the more trustworthy choice, especially because he just tells her, well, you should be allowed to do whatever you want, because apparently he read some fucking Germaine Greer between this book and the last one. And while we'd heard about the horrors of what the Night Court was, apparently that's just the propaganda version of the Night Court, because apparently the real Night Court is in this hidden city that nobody knows about, but is full of artists and trendy bars and artisan coffee shops and parties and meringues and what have you. So rather than kind of doing the work to redeem Rhysand and showing a bit of a spiral from Tamlin to give us compelling reasons for Farah to choose between them, she just Farah just accepts the fact that, oh, okay, there's still other side to him now, or we can forget about all the murdering and torturing and humiliation and shit from under the mountains before, but because I like him now because Tamlin locked me up once. And it also seems that, just Tamlin locking her up isn't enough. Sarah J. Maas had to make him a traitor as well. She just had to put the boot in to make him a complete and utter bastard in order to make the choice, well, a non-choice, really. And actually, both of them, if you think about the way that she was introduced to both of these characters, I mean, this is a case study in, young women. These are the red flags that you should look out for when you're starting a relationship with someone. I mean, these two throw up so many red flags, they might as well be communicating in fucking semaphore. Farah hasn't changed that much, but she's really, really unlikable. Even when she's trying to be nice to people, she just comes out with arsey comments, and I think it's intended to come across as good-natured ribbing, but she just kind of comes across as an arsehole. And the real problem is the bloody size of it. It is over 600 pages long, and for the 400 pages in between Farah leaving and the climax of the story, absolutely bugger all happens in it. The chapters are broken down into 3 different types. The ones where she's flirting with Rhysand and, sending fairy text messages back and forth to him. The chapters where she meets some people, she asks a question, and then gets 3 pages of exposition about stuff that happened in the past, or an explanation of the fairy world, or someone's character history, or something like that. Or the third thing, which is, we have to go to this place to get this thing in order to move the quest forward. That happens about 4 times, and that does not feel like the plot of a novel. That feels like the plot of a video game. By the way, I'd just like to point out, if the only videos that you've seen of me are this, the other ACOTAR review, and my review of the Farseer trilogy, you probably think I just complain about every single book I read. That's not true. Most of the stuff I read, I tend to be really positive about. For example, I'm rereading the entire Discworld series, and I love that. And if you want to see some of those videos, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button. I'm way less snarky in those ones. And now I'm going to talk about the real elephant in the room, which is the reason that many people buy these books in the first place. The spice, the sex scenes. Now, here's the thing. I've read quite a lot of books in my time, and it is painfully obvious that most, even really accomplished authors, don't write sex scenes well. They don't write them in a way that don't make you want to cringe. So, I mean, one of my favorite authors, Stephen King, his sex scenes make you want to crawl under the coffee table and pray for the sweet release of death in order to get out of the cringiness that you're enduring. So, going into these books where it seems that the primary reason behind them is to have these spicy scenes in it, I had kind of high hopes. I kind of was thinking, okay, is this where I get to see it done right? And first of all, they're nowhere near as spicy as people make them out to be. There's a couple of sex scenes in it, not actually that much, it's mostly the other stuff where they're just hanging around at coffee shops or trying to do fetch quests to move the plot of the video game further forward. But when you do actually get to the sex scenes, to be honest with you, I find them kind of hilarious. Sarah J. Maas seems to describe her sex scenes largely by a whole series of metaphors and euphemisms. I mean, one of her favourites is the sword metaphor, which is why you get lines like, "He sheathed himself deep in me with a single stroke." Sheathed. Now, that is objectively hilarious. And to be honest, the metaphor kind of doesn't always work, such as in "Rhys roared as he came, slamming into the hilt." The hilt? I mean, that implies that there's a handle underneath it. I'd like to apologise to anyone whose ears started to bleed out of pure cringe from listening to a middle-aged Irish guy describing sex between 2 fairies. I'm sorry. I have to say, climax aside, I've really got to stop using the word climax. Conclusion aside, I really don't like Sarah J. Maas's writing style. It just does not work for me. Pacing wise, I just feel like there's a whole swathes of the book where bugger all happens, and then we get towards the last 100 pages and she thinks, oh shit, I have a plot that I need to move forward, and then everything happens within that 100 pages. Now, that wasn't great in A Court of Thorns and Roses, but when this one's got an extra 200 pages of filler in there, it's a hell of a lot worse. The language choices as well are really weird, and one time she's kind of using this sort of old style romantic fairy tale way of telling the story, but then she'll call someone a prick and tell him to get over himself. It's very, very off-putting, and from an immersion perspective, it just takes you right out of the story where you're thinking, oh, that's a really odd choice of words. And if we're talking about choice of words, the overuse of the word mate, oh my god, it's like listening to a group of drunk Australians. It's just mate, 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 mate this, mate that. Everything's mate. Oh god. I don't disagree with anything that Misery Arse is saying on here, but I will say that he is missing the point that just because these books don't work for me, it doesn't mean that they're not working for other people, and they clearly do. These books are incredibly popular, and as well as being popular, they are acting as a gateway for a lot of people to discover the joy of reading or rediscover the joy of reading. And that is a good thing, and that is why they shouldn't be banned in schools, even if there is sheathing going on in them. Look, you're just going to have to forgive him. He's a bit miserable. He's got a cold. He's cranky. So going back to the question I asked at the start of this, is this the book that finally made me love ACOTAR? And if you'd have asked me that question yesterday before I got to the final 100 pages, the answer would have been, Christ no, it's interminably boring. I kind of hate it. And then the last 100 pages redeemed it. It's too bloody long. I don't really like the way that the character development is done in it. But it is kind of a compelling story, and God help me, I'm kind of interested in what happens next. I gave it 2 stars, again, same as the last one. Again, if I'd been asked this question yesterday, this was sailing at least for a 1-star maximum, but the ending redeemed it quite an awful lot. So that was my review of A Court of Mist and Fury. I'm sure you've got some thoughts, so if you do, please consider leaving them in the comment section down below. I hope you enjoyed this, more so than I enjoyed reading the bloody thing. If you did, please consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching, and take care.